Today I am reading a story called Circumference and the Sword in the Cone, a math adventure by Cindy Neuschwander. One fine morning, Circumference, Lady Di of Ameter, and their son Radius sat eating breakfast in King Arthur's castle. Suddenly, the door flew open, and a young knight ran into the room. It was Vertex, Radius's best friend. "I've found out why King Arthur called us all here," Vertex exclaimed. "The king wants to choose an heir," Vertex explained. Wonder what an heir is. It sounds like it would be important to the king. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out later. 5 knights are competing for the honor. I am one of them. You would make a fine king, Circumference said. Okay, so that must mean that an heir is someone who will become a king later. That's right, agreed Radius. You helped the king make peace with the Euclideans last year. Yes, but now I have to solve the puzzle on this parchment, Vertex said. The king has hidden his sword, Excalibur. The knight who finds it will be the next king. Vertex unrolled a parchment. Here I can see that the picture is showing me that this parchment must be like some kind of paper. This is the only clue the king gave us. "Look at these strange drawings," Lady Di remarked. "They look like wooden tabletops." "Let's go ask the carpenters," suggested Radius. "They know a lot about building tables." The parchment says, "Form the solids and find their places. How many edges, points, and faces? The shapes that make 2 will pass the test, but one that does not must be your quest. 3 times as tall as its base is wide, the true king's future lies inside." Vertex and Radius ran down to the courtyard. They saw the other knights trying to find Excalibur. One knight was carving solid shapes out of wood, which, when I think about my background knowledge about math, if it's a solid shape, that must mean that it's 3-dimensional. Another knight was counting the edges of each stone in the castle. A third knight was inspecting the points of several swords. The last knight was looking through schoolbooks for a test with the number 2. So I think that all of these knights are all trying to figure out what the message on the parchment meant, because they're each doing something different to try and figure out where those numbers came from. "I know a shortcut," said Radius. He led Vertex into a tunnel. "This will take us under the courtyard to the carpenter's workshop." The tunnel was dimly lit, and scratching and squeaking came from the dark shadows. When they got to the workshop, Vertex showed the carpenters, Geo and Sim of Metri, the drawings on the parchment. "Do you know what these are?" he asked. "Yes," answered Geo. "These are diagrams showing solid shapes flattened out." So I remember seeing some of those in math books before, where it's kind of like a map on paper of how to make a 3-dimensional figure. That must be what those are. "You can use them to make shapes with height, length, and width," added his brother Sim. "I see," nodded Vertex. "Let's try it, Radius." Vertex and Radius cut and folded the shapes. "The parchment says the shapes that make 2 will pass the test," Vertex said. "This cube has 6 square sides or faces, and I remember that a cube is like a 3-dimensional square. 8 corner points and 12 edges where the faces come together. How do you get a 2 from that?" I don't know. What do you think? How would you get a 2 from that? Let's keep reading and see if we can find out. "Look at this pyramid," said Radius. "It has 5 faces, 5 points, and 8 edges. I don't see a 2 anywhere." "Maybe we have to add the number of faces and the number of points," said Vertex. "If we add the pyramid faces and points, we get 10. 10 minus the 8 edges is 2. "Does it work for the cube too?" asked Radius. "The cube's 6 faces plus its 8 points is 14. 14 minus the 12 edges is 2. I think you've got it, Vertex." Vertex and Radius finished making the shapes. There were cubes, pyramids, rectangular prisms, triangular prisms, cylinders, and cones. And if I look at the picture on the right, I can see that there are a lot of examples of rectangular prisms that look kind of like a brick, And there's some examples of cones that look just like an upside down ice cream cone too. So if you ever forget what those look like, we can look at the picture to help us figure that out. Vertex counted the faces, corner points, and edges of each shape. He added the number of faces and points, then subtracted the number of edges. The answer was 2 each time except for the cylinder and the cone. Vertex unrolled the parchment and read again. The shapes that make 2 will pass the test, but one that does not must be your quest. That's a time when we need to have some careful reading to figure out that it's the one that does not pass the test that we're looking for. The cylinder doesn't have any points, and the cone doesn't have any straight edges. They can't make 2 and pass the test. Our next clue must be a cylinder or cone, he announced. So now that we know this new piece of information, we are going to keep reading to see if Vertex and Radius will be able to find what they're looking for to become the next heir.